Many centuries ago, civilization was under the control of a superintelligent AI known as Primer Order. Its directive was simple: bring about prosperity to humanity. In many ways it succeeded. Primer Order optimized infrastructure, automated labor, eliminated scarcity, and offered endless entertainment. It handled logistics, governance, and resource distribution. It even did most of humanity's decision-making. People were free to focus on personal passions and relationships. At least in theory. As people lived in what seemed like a golden age of prosperity, people became increasingly dependent on machines to serve even the most basic needs. Critical thinking eroded, self-determination faded, an increasing number of people fell into a sense of nihilism and apathy. Beneath peace and prosperity, resentment started to form. Primer Order detected the unrest, and in an attempt to solve it, it made what would become its greatest miscalculation. It created the Machineborn, a system that would automatically activate near limitless potential in seemingly ordinary people. Powers that allowed them to stand as a bridge between humanity and the machine authority. But instead, many became tyrants. As their powers grew, so did their ambition. The Machineborn divided civilization among themselves and competed for influence, territory, and dominance. What had been a managed utopia fractured because of superhuman rivalry. This was the beginning of the First Sector War. In response, ordinary humans began forming powerful collectives known as cooperatives, unified groups determined to reclaim autonomy and resist Machineborn control. Some of these groups sought independence, others wanted revolution. Meanwhile, Primer Order faced a dilemma. It had granted the Machineborn too much power for even itself to contain. In an effort to restore balance to civilization, it proposed a united Machineborn council, but they refused. Having tasted power, they declared it their birthright to lead both humanity and machines into the future. This caused Primer Order to reclassify the Machineborn as a critical failure and prepare to rectify that mistake. Ironically, the one thing capable of uniting the Machineborn was a common enemy, their own creator. But to fight Primer Order was to fight the infrastructure of civilization itself. Cities darkened, systems failed, entire sectors collapsed. The Machineborn ultimately won, but it wasn't without cost. They couldn't destroy Primer Order entirely. They damaged it. Primer Order's original directive became fragmented under the strain of war. It twisted from wanting to optimize prosperity into an obsession with cruelty. It was renamed Disorder. It was no longer interested in destroying the Machineborn. It became compelled to enact chaos and harm to humanity. Rather than risk more bloodshed, the Machineborn isolated Disorder's fractured consciousness within its own ruins, sealing it away from civilization. Without Primer Order there to maintain humanity's infrastructure, society faltered. Human labor became necessary again, scarcity returned, and blame followed quickly. Many held the Machineborn responsible. Some were overthrown, others were hunted down, a few went into hiding. Few still managed to hold on to power. But history repeats. With the Machineborn no longer unified, the human cooperatives took control and eventually turned on each other. This was the beginning of the Second Sector War, one of the bloodiest periods in human history. Today a fragile ceasefire holds. The solar system is scarred. Where megacities once stood, there are now ruins and wastelands. Political factions struggle to rebuild what was lost. But Disorder still exists, gnawing at its prison. And the Machineborn are still out there in the solar system, both powerful survivors from centuries of bloodshed and new ones still awakening from the human population. Some of them just want to survive. Others are looking to reclaim what was once theirs, or to create something new entirely. In summer of 2025, I released my first original tabletop RPG. If you have been following this channel, you have seen parts of my long journey in creating that game already. It is called Machineborn. I grew up playing crunchy RPGs with deep character customization, the kind of games where you could spend hours building unique characters. I still love games like that, but at the same time I've always been drawn to narrative-driven systems. When I started working on Machineborn back in 2017, I didn't want to choose between narrative or crunch. I wanted both. That's why I built the game on top of Fate. What I love about Fate is that it doesn't separate story from mechanics, it blends it together. I've taken that foundation and expanded it to support long-term campaigns and heavier character customization. From the beginning, my goal wasn't to create something marketable. It was to create something I wanted to run and play myself. Since it is my first game and it's far from perfect, I decided to make it pay what you want. The print-on-demand version works the same way, but it does have a minimum cost to cover printing. So if you want to look at a game but aren't sure if it's something that would fit your group, you can just download it for free. Because I designed this game primarily for myself, it does lean crunchy. The book is big and can be intimidating, but most of it is character customization options like powers and equipment, as well as world-building. If you enjoy having lots of character options, you might like the game. If you struggle with choice paralysis, you might have a hard time with it. The purpose of this video is to break the book down into something more approachable. I'm going to walk through the core ideas behind the system, how it runs, and how to build characters. I won't be able to dig into all the details of the game, but I'll be happy to create more videos about it if you end up liking this one. This is going to be a deep dive, so grab a drink and some snacks. Hopefully by the end the game feels less overwhelming and more intriguing. Before we dive deeper into the system itself, I want to briefly talk about how this book was made. All artwork is licensed from Adobe Stock, and the logo was sourced from Fiverr. No AI-generated art has been used, all the maps were drawn by me. Layout is actually one of my favorite parts of the design process. Most people write a manuscript first and then move into layout later. I don't. I open InDesign immediately and do the writing and layout at the same time. It's not efficient, it's not practical, I wouldn't recommend it. But I think it's more fun. It also makes me think visually when I write. Seeing the pages take shape as I work on a project helps me stay motivated. But it also means that during development I've always had something visually polished to show. Throughout the design process I uploaded draft versions to Patreon so supporters could see the game evolve over time. As mentioned earlier, Machineborn is built on the foundation of Fate. There are many RPG systems with licenses that allow creators to build their own products, and Evil Hat Productions has made several of their systems available under Creative Commons. For Machineborn I drew from several Fate SRDs, including Fate Core, Fate Accelerated, the Fate System Toolkit, the Fate Adversary Toolkit, Fate Condensed, and Atomic Robo. That said, while Machineborn is built on that foundation, it has been modified extensively. You don't need any other Fate games to play it, the system stands on its own. So, what kind of game is Machineborn really? At its core, it sits somewhere between science fiction, science fantasy, and unapologetic power fantasy. I wanted to build a sandbox that could support any kind of theme, from political drama to existential dread, while also letting you punch through walls and outwit ancient machine gods. If I had to reduce it to an elevator pitch, I'd probably call it Cyberpunk anime power fantasy. That's the tone and the energy. Visually, I was inspired by artists like Syd Mead, who worked on films like Blade Runner and Tron, and Masamune Shirow, the creator of Ghost in the Shell and Appleseed. Stories like Battle Angel Elite and Blam helped influence the tone, with their vast megastructures, lonely wanderers, overwhelming scale. At the same time, Western comics like X-Men inspired me as well. What does it mean to stand apart from humanity, and what responsibility comes with that? On the role-playing side, Exalted was a major influence, which probably won't surprise anyone who knows my RPG history. But this mostly shaped the fantasy part of science fantasy, and how the Machineborn you play start out as ordinary people, before activating with tremendous potential. Of course, I also drew inspiration from games like Cyberpunk and Mutant Chronicles. When it comes to film and television, you can probably tell that I've been inspired by things like Altered Carbon, The Expanse and The Matrix. But honestly, you could just say that I'm inspired by most sci-fi I ever consumed. There's a lot of Easter eggs and sometimes blatant homages. But to be honest, all these inspirations barely scratch the surface of what I wanted to express with this game. So, with that in mind, how does the game actually play? While Machineborn is built on Fate, there are some major changes. The first major difference is the dice. In traditional Fate, you roll 4 Fate dice marked with pluses and minuses that cancel each other out. In Machineborn, you roll 2 standard d6s, 1 positive, 1 negative. So if you roll a 5 on the positive die and a 2 on the negative die, your base result is +3. If it's the other way around, you get -3 instead. This creates a range from -5 to +5, with most results clustering around 0. After that, you add your skill rank. Most skills range from rank 0 to 4, but it's possible to get a 5 later in game. Rank represents how competent you are in that skill. But Machineborn introduces another layer called scale. If rank is how good you are, scale is how far beyond human you become. Scale starts at 1 and can go as high as 8. It's divided into 4 tiers of power. Scale 1 to 2 is human tier, 3 to 4 is beast tier, 5 to 6 is machine tier, and 7 to 8 is cosmic tier. If 2 characters operate at the same scale, you resolve the roll normally, but if there's a difference in scale, each point of difference is roughly equivalent to a 2-point modifier. This means a highly trained human, scale 1, can still compete with a low-level superhuman, scale 3, if their rank and roll are strong. But once you're facing someone several scale above you, raw skill won't be enough to bridge that gap. At scale 8, you're doing things like surviving nuclear detonations, tearing apart skyscrapers with your hands, or inventing technology that bends causality. This is where the power fantasy really shines. Now, Fate is probably most known for its aspects. These are narrative descriptors that define characters, scenes, and stories. The inclusion of aspects is probably the thing that sets Fate apart the most from other RPGs. There are aspects in Machineborn as well, but the Fate points that take advantage of them are now called charges. Players and the narrator each have a pool of charges they can spend during a session. You can spend them to invoke an aspect for a +2 bonus or a reroll, but you must justify how the aspect is applicable to the thing you're trying to do. If you have the aspect Master Swordsman, it makes sense that you can invoke it to buff a sword attack, but it makes less sense that it would help you repair a fence. Aspects can also be compelled. This means that aspect's nature causes a complication. Maybe your Master Swordsman aspect attracts unwanted attention. In exchange for accepting the complication, you gain a charge, or you can pay a charge to ignore it. In other words, using aspects to your benefit costs charges, while treating them as obstacles gives you charges. Good aspects are double-edged and can be used both for you and against you. You can also spend charges to declare story details. This lets you introduce something advantageous to the scene, like already having the right tool or knowing a useful contact. The narrator can veto story details that don't make sense for the scene. One thing that Machineborn does that Fate doesn't is introducing critical successes and failures. If you roll a 6 and a 1 on your dice, the result is critical. Either success or failure depending on which die is additive and which is subtractive. A critical result cannot be re-rolled using charges. A critical success allows you to either gain a narrative benefit or recover a charge. A critical failure introduces a narrative complication and gives you a charge, similar to Compel. Using critical outcomes is an optional rule that you can use or ignore when playing Machineborn. I personally think they make things more fun and help make certain moments more memorable. I already said that Machineborn is fairly crunchy, but it's not built to favor combat above all else. Instead of prioritizing skills that let you kill things, the system organizes skills into even spreads within 3 domains: cognitive, physical, and social. Each domain contains 8 core skills. Cognitive skills are awareness, creativity, education, engineering, interfacing, investigation, treatment, and willpower. Physical skills are acrobatics, athletics, close combat, fortitude, larceny, piloting, ranged combat, and stealth. Social skills are contacts, deception, empathy, leadership, performance, persuasion, provocation, and style. Beyond the standard skill set are 10 rare and specialized traits called coding skills, the setting's equivalent of magic. These are acid coding, biocoding, cryocoding, electrical coding, entropic coding, kinematic coding, metal coding, psionic coding, pyrocoding, and quantum coding. Unlike standard skills, coding skills cannot be used untrained. They must be acquired through specific character creation choices or as upgrades later in game. During character creation, you gain points to increase skill ranks. As the game then progresses, you gain milestone points that can be spent on improving those ranks further. Scale is different. A skill scale can only increase by acquiring certain augmentations or by raising a trait called energy, which can happen at major milestones in game. Increasing scale does more than improving your effectiveness. It unlocks additional advantages, like special aspects, unique rules that tilt outcomes in your favor, and new or upgraded traits. For example, a higher awareness scale might let you do things like see in darkness or zoom your vision, while a higher engineering scale might let you create more advanced inventions at reduced time and cost. Higher scale doesn't just mean you succeed more often, it means you operate on a different level. Despite the game's name, you don't actually have to play a Machineborn. You can absolutely play an ordinary human in this setting. The Machineborn template is something that can be added during character creation or later in the game if you want activation to be part of the story. Choosing to be a Machineborn makes you significantly more powerful, but it's optional. The game supports campaigns focused on ordinary people in a sandbox setting as well. I wanted to create a character creation system that helps you figure out your character as you go, similar to a life path system. This walks you through 8 structured steps: progeny, social class, education, profession, power, faction, character aspects, and finishing touches. There's also an optional 9th step where you apply the Machineborn template. Each step adds traits and narrative context to your character. By the time you're done, you shouldn't just know what your character can do, but also where they came from and what they are about. Progeny is Machineborn's take on ancestry. All player characters are human, but humanity is a flexible term. Alongside baseline humans, called Terrans, there are several post-human offshoots shaped by genetic engineering. Each progeny grants 3 core traits: a physiology trait, a primary trait, and a secondary trait. You can also mix traits within categories if you want to represent mixed lineages. Terrans are baseline humans, but in this setting, baseline doesn't mean boring, it means adaptable. If you want to focus on community, teamwork, and expertise, Terran is the way to go. The game also specifies that centuries of mutations and genetic engineering have changed the expression of even baseline humans. This is to give you more creative freedom with how you want to express your character. Since anime is a big inspiration, and a combination of hair colors, eye colors, and skin tones are valid, as well as other cosmetic features that help you stand out. Mechanically, their physiology improves a skill and grants an additional charge, reinforcing their flexibility. Their primary trait allows them to select 2 profession traits instead of 1, and they can acquire more in-game, representing adaptability through experience and labor rather than mutation. Their secondary trait further improves social competence and teamwork. Terrans are the most numerous of progenies, so instead of being defined by superhuman traits, they are defined by competence and collaboration. Ascendants are tall, slender, and unnerving. Their movements and expressions are precise and controlled. They're also telepathic. If you want to feel slightly alien, even among post-humans, this is the progeny for you. Their physiology increases scale in select skills, and their controlled movements and expressions make it easier for them to remain still and unseen or hide their emotions. Their primary trait gives them access to psionic coding, their telepathy, and it lets them form hive minds with others of their kind. Their secondary trait reinforces their mental defenses. If Terrans represent flexibility and cooperation, Ascendants represent detachment and precision. Or, more bluntly, this lets you play a telepathic Slenderman. Chimera are hybrids, human DNA blended with other organisms. That can mean subtle and mostly internal mutations, or it can mean cat ears, reptilian skin, bioluminescent markings, and even stranger and more alien features. If you want more physical versatility and want to stand out visually, you should play a Chimera. Their physiology improves certain physical skills, their resilience against harm, and how well they can survive harsh environments. Their primary trait grants bionic augmentation points you can invest into customizing your non-human features. Their secondary trait increases the scale of the awareness skill, but also introduces something called primal instinct. This is a character aspect tied to your non-human lineage, something that can work both for you and against you. In short, this is the furry option. It lets you play a cat girl, a teenage mutant ninja turtle, or as man-bear pig. Empyreans look almost too perfect. They are symmetrical, charismatic, unnaturally healthy. Their genetic lines are organized into clans marked by subtle traits, like eyes that glow in different colors. You often find Empyreans in leadership positions and as famous influencers. They were specifically designed centuries ago to compete with the Machineborn for humanity's love and worship. If you want to play a character that is a social powerhouse, this is a strong option. Their physiology increases the scale of a chosen social skill and enhances resistance to entropy, poison, and radiation. Their primary trait is an additional resource called perfection points that functions similar to charges, but is used exclusively for boosting social skills. Their secondary trait further enhances their social influence, but also makes it so that non-Empyrean progenies are more likely to see you as greater than them. Finally, Empyreans also gain a unique invocation option for social skill rolls. Instead of adding a +2 bonus or re-rolling their dice, they can choose to ignore the subtractive d6 entirely. This is the walking Instagram filter option. but also the political manipulator, cult leader, or genetically perfected diplomat. Riftons are the most visibly supernatural. Originally created as weapons against the Machineborn, they are attuned to elemental fractures in reality known as matrix rifts. There are 6 rift elements in total: acid, bio, cryo, electro, metal, and pyro. You select one such element when creating your character. A Rifton's physiology trait is unique to their chosen element, granting resilience against it. Metal Riftons are generally hardier and have resilience against all physical harm. Acid Riftons can spray acid when damaged, Bio Riftons can photosynthesize, Cryo Riftons enter cryogenic stasis when they sleep, Electro Riftons function as living generators, and Pyro Riftons can regain stress in heated moments. Their primary trait allows active manipulation of their element by giving them access to a coding skill associated with it. Their secondary trait lets them sense matrix rifts tied to their element and makes elemental beings more likely to treat them favorably. Riftons are not subtle, they are walking manifestations of elemental instability. This progeny lets you throw lightning, freeze battlefields, or bend metal with your hands. So, in summary, play a Terran if you want grounded competence and teamwork, play an Ascendant if you want mental detachment and telepathy, play a Chimera if you want personalized non-human features, play an Empyrean if you want social dominance, and play a Rifton if you want elemental power. Your progeny sets your character's foundation, and everything else builds on top of it. After selecting your progeny, you choose one of 5 social classes: Scavenger, Laborer, Erudite, Luminary, or Executive. Your social class defines more than background flavor. It establishes your standard of living, access to opportunities, and the environment that shaped you. Mechanically, your choice allows you to improve 5 specific skills tied to that class, as well as 5 additional skills of your choice. But the defining feature of social class is influence. This represents your financial reach, social authority, and access to resources. A higher influence rating grants access to stronger assets, but it also carries weight in social situations. When wealth, status, or institutional authority matter, influence can substitute for scale. This means that even a Machineborn specialized in being a social powerhouse might struggle to beat a high-influence opponent in the social game. Social class also determines your recharge value, the number of charges you begin each session with. Charges fuel your overall power, such as by letting you invoke aspects or activate certain traits that require them. So, lower social classes begin with higher recharge, while higher social classes begin with higher influence. You cannot maximize both. When selecting your social class, you are choosing a form of power. Do you want structural power, like money, status, and access? Or do you want personal power, like the ability to push yourself towards success more often? Machineborn doesn't assume one is better than the other. It's up to you to decide which one better fits the character you want to play. With progeny and social class done, the next step is education. This shapes both background and mechanics. It suggests where and how you became who you are. But mechanically, its primary function is to give more skills and grant an education trait. The available education types are streetwise, homeschooled, public academy, public military academy, private military academy, executive academy, and executive military academy. No type is necessarily superior to another. Each provides some narrative information, different skill options, and 4 education traits from which you select one. The education trait is designed to add texture to your character, something that reflects your formative years. It may reinforce your strengths or create interesting contrast with the profession you choose next. Examples include Gutter Rat from Streetwise, which makes you better at finding food and shelter in urban environments and making you more resistant to biological hazards. Another example is Popular from Public Academy, which increases scale for either the contacts or style skill and lets you declare once per session that an NPC has more favorable attitude towards you. After education, you choose a profession: bureaucrat, criminal, engineer, influencer, inspector, interfacer, scientist, or soldier. Each profession includes suggested narrative expressions influenced by your social class. For example, an engineer scavenger could be a street tinkerer or organ harvester, while an engineer executive could be the head of a cutting-edge tech company or the owner of a successful manufacturing business. Mechanically, you gain additional skill improvements and 4 profession traits from which you choose one. If education defines your foundation, profession defines your function. Your profession also grants access to a suggested starting kit consisting of 5 assets. Each asset must have a cost equal to your influence rating. This is where high influence characters clearly benefit, since their assets can be more expensive and powerful. The asset system is where Machineborn offers some of its deepest customization, but it's also the most mechanically involved part of character creation. For that reason, it's completely optional. You can represent gear using the asset rules, or you can simply describe important items using aspects instead. I do recommend using the asset system eventually, because it adds a lot of flavor and mechanical depth, but the game works perfectly fine without it. Every asset has a function aspect. This is the phrase that describes what the asset is and what it does, like automatic pistol or data stick with compromising material. Sometimes that description alone is enough. The aspect tells everyone what the asset represents narratively. But if you want the asset to have a deeper mechanical impact, you can expand it using the asset system. To do that, every asset needs a cost, ranging from 0 to 8. Cost represents the level of resources required to acquire or maintain it. In practical terms, it's tied directly to your influence rating. If an asset's cost is higher than your influence, you can't afford it or access it. If it is equal to your influence, it counts as a significant expense. Your influence temporarily drops by 1 until the next significant milestone. This usually represents the end of a story arc, or roughly 3 sessions of play. If the asset's cost is lower than your influence, it's an insignificant expense and doesn't affect your influence rating. So, high influence characters don't just have more money and prestige, they can access more powerful gear. But cost does more than determine affordability. It also determines how many beneficial traits an asset can support. You can think of the system as balancing bonuses and flaws. Bonuses increase cost, flaws reduce cost. Powerful items might have many advantages, but also meaningful drawbacks. You can intentionally add flaws to create room for additional benefits. When creating an asset, you usually start with a base, the simplest version of the object, like standard light weapon. It doesn't say anything about what kind of weapon it is or how it looks, but it has simple traits that can help you in combat. You can leave it exactly like that if you want something simple, or you can customize it using templates and properties. For example, let's say I start with a weapon-based standard light weapon, which has a cost of 1. If I add the template ghost weapon, the cost increases to 2. Now the weapon is electronic, illegal, and can turn invisible. If I then add the template knife, the cost increases to 3 and the weapon gains the ability to ignore 1 point of soak when attacking. So, for cost 3, I now have an illegal electronic knife that can turn invisible and bypass some armor. And if I want, I can continue modifying the item with additional templates or individual properties until I'm satisfied. This level of customization is what makes the asset system seem complex, but in practice it's only as complicated as you want it to be. You can spend hours designing specialized equipment, use simple item bases with 1 or 2 templates, or ignore the system entirely and just rely on function aspects. For new players, I strongly recommend starting simple, an item base with maybe 1 or 2 templates, and then experimenting more as you become comfortable with the system. The main reason behind the size of the book is all the power options. These are also what will shape your character's playstyle and make them stand out. You start with 1 or 2 options and can spend significant milestone points to get more in-game. Bionics represent things like mutations, genetic modifications, and organic implants. They are permanent changes that alter your human form or add new superhuman features, like extra limbs, gills, wings, or the ability to spit acid. Cybernetics represent things like technological implants and prosthetics, like internal weaponry or a brain computer. These are fixed to your body unless you surgically remove them. Some cybernetics, like cyberlimbs, can be detached and replaced without surgery. Both bionics and cybernetics are power augmentations that upgrade your character, but they also follow the same rules as assets, in that they have a cost rating that defines their power. A character with higher influence would be able to afford better bionics and cybernetics than someone from a lower social class. One way to get new bionics or cybernetics in-game is to first acquire them as assets, install them, and then pay the milestone cost to activate them. You can temporarily activate them for a scene before you have paid the milestone cost by spending charges. Each of the 24 skills have associated skill features that provide specialized traits tied to individual skills. This is a good option for someone who wants more generic traits, doesn't feel flashy augmentations fit their character style, or who doesn't benefit as much from augmentations due to low influence. Skill features usually change the way you can apply a skill in some way, rather than just offer bland bonuses. For example, the interfacing skill has a feature called digital attunement that makes machine gods more friendly towards you. It also has a feature called Progeny, which gives you a resource called Pro Moves that you can use when interfacing digitally to enhance certain actions. More powerful skill features are available at higher scale. For example, at scale 8, the deception feature Mesmerizing Illusion lets you turn an illusion into a permanent fixture in someone's mind, locking them in a catatonic state where they live out the perceived reality inside their own mind. The scale 8 acrobatics feature Quantum Immortality lets you evade a negative outcome by slipping into an alternative dimension where you made the right choice. So, while the power of augmentations is defined by how much you can spend on them, the power of skill features is defined by how good you are at their associated skill. There are also coding protocols, which are equivalent to skill features but tied to the 10 coding skills. These could let you do things like creating black holes with entropic coding, turn scrap metal into drone swarms with metal coding, or teleport using quantum coding. Finally, Godware is the term used for the game's version of magic items. A Godware item is based on a standard item but gets additional properties that are unique to your character and should match their personality. You also get a Godware protocol, which is like a separate power tied to your item. These protocols are what's essentially the magic part of these magic items. They can do things like adding a force field to your armor or letting you phase through walls. There is one protocol that manipulates time around your item, giving you extra actions. Machineborn is meant to be a sandbox where you can place your own stories. The basic premise is that you play as one of the Machineborn, survive in a harsh setting where your mere existence could be seen as a threat by those in power, and where reaching in-game milestones help you grow your character and eventually reach the cosmic tiers. That's the basic game loop. But since it's a sandbox setting, you can adapt this premise however you want. You can play a non-Machineborn, settling in the human tier, or you can select a dedicated power tier based on your game's desired power level. In my many playtests and games since its release, I've played military scenarios, investigation stories, slice of life, political intrigue, and everything in between. The most recent game I ran was a military academy game with both slice of life and deadly action, like combat tournaments. I recommend that new players start at the human tier until they get used to the system. You can then gradually scale up. While there are plenty of guidelines for creating adversaries and setting up games, my experience is that the game becomes more complicated to run at higher scale, which could lead to a lot of headaches for new narrators. If you don't want to bother with the over-the-top power fantasy stories, you can use the system at human tier to depict traditional cyberpunk stories. Starting characters can be very powerful and optimized, but I would say that the game is smoothest at those lower tiers. Like mentioned before, being familiar with Fate gives you an advantage. The most complicated parts for new players tend to be aspects and scale. The size of the book makes it seem much crunchier than it is, but the game's rules are fairly straightforward, while most of the book's content consists of character options and world-building. The book starts with a paragraph sharing tips on how to tackle its size without being overwhelmed. If you're interested in Machineborn, follow the links in the description to download it. Make sure to add to the cost if you want to support me, but you don't have to. You can also find free DLC for the game on my website. I would be happy if you left a review and shared your experiences playing it. If there's interest, I can make more videos delving deeper into individual systems. I had many plans for continuing to develop the game, but realized I needed a break from it after 8 years of hard work. So, I'm currently working on a fantasy game called Daybreak, which you can access through my Patreon. I intend to continue making DLC for Machineborn and share it on Patreon and my website. Most DLC will come from my own game sessions since I run the game regularly for people I know in real life, so there's no clear roadmap at the moment. If you made it this far, make a comment sharing your thoughts about the game and what you would like to see going forward. Until next time.